Welcome to Still Untitled. I'm Will.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Norm.
We're in every time we record, we're in a different place.
I like it that way. We mix it up.
And this is a good way to encourage people to watch the video because people just listening to the audio would go, "What are they talking about?
Yes.
I should go watch that video."
But there's some housekeeping stuff. First up, we have a new podcast feed for this show. We used to only be able to do one podcast feed. Now we have two podcast feeds. So if you want to listen to this and the other podcast both, you have to subscribe to them both. This is important. I'm going to post this one in both places, but it's the last time that'll ever happen. So go subscribe on iTunes. Where are we, Adam?
We are in my home office, in my house. So obviously, since we've done a lot of podcasts from the Man Cave and we've done podcasts from my office at Mythbusters Central, it's pretty clear from the shots that both of those places are full of things. Visual cacophony abounds.
It's a dense environment.
It is a dense
Whenever
environment.
we go any place with you, it seems like.
And my wife and I, when we first moved in here, we talked about this, and left to my own devices, I really like being overwhelmed by a space. And she requested that I not do that to this office, which is a very reasonable request because honestly, I am so happy about the different spaces that I work and live in. This one is a really, really peaceful space to me. So I keep only my favorite objects in here, the ones that I would really be unhappy to lose and things that I really like to handle.
So we'll do a tour at some point in the future. But,
Yes.
but what do you do? We know what you do in the shop.
Yeah.
And we know what you do at Mythbusters Central. What is this like? What happens in this space?
Well, so you're sitting on my couch, which is made by a California company called Viaski. They're made in the United States. They're beautiful couches. I call that my Don Draper.
Okay.
Because it's totally mid-century modern. You could lie down on it and someone could still sit at the other end and read a book. It's gigantic.
Or smoking jackets and
Absolutely. So I do if I have conference calls, which I do a lot on the weekends and after work, I do them sitting on this couch in this room. I have this weird OCD thing that when I'm having a conference call, I walk around.
Yes.
But
You like
I not
shapes.
only walk around, I like arrange things all over the place. So you can tell how I've been feeling about a conference call by how well arranged everything in the room is.
pacing with the conference call.
Yes.
It's because you want to keep not your mind active, but your body active too.
And the arranging is really, really important to me. So this room is set up so that things can be arranged precisely in neat little rows. My desk, you can see through it. The shelves behind me, which also are locally made by a San Francisco company, allow me to really delicately organize things. I also, this is probably our main house computer where my kids do homework and stuff like that. But I also do writing in here. You know,
Okay.
when I have projects to work on, this is my sanctum sanctorum in the house. And having twin 13-year-old boys and 2 dogs and all of that, while I have the man cave and I work full-time at Mythbusters, I really do like to spend as much time as I can here, not always traveling out of the house.
Now, because you have to keep this room under control, do you find that you have to swap things out? I mean, like pictures out, things on the shelves, because you don't want to get
When
cluttered.
something comes in, does something else have to leave?
That's often the case. You know, everybody's life is effectively a tile puzzle.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to move something out of the way to move something in. And this room, well, it's hard to go by because we've been doing a renovation on the ground floor of this house for the last 6 months, and we're almost done, which means the whole family's been camping on this floor. It's been exhausting. And this room tends to be one of the major repositories of stuff. And we're in the process of sort of moving a lot of things around. We have 3 different storage spaces. It's a lot of detritus in this high-functioning hoarder's life.
And when you live in a city where everything's small.
Yes.
I mean, we're not Manhattan small in San Francisco, but it is still, there's not that much space.
Yeah.
And everybody's houses are smaller than you'd expect. And yeah, so stuff has to go someplace.
high
totally
functioning
does.
hour. I like
yeah.
that.
High-functioning
that's
hoarder.
very good. That's
You know that the RPF, since you said it's a open source Lucius Fox, the RPF has embraced that phrase. They just love it. This is like one of their favorite quotes.
Oh, that's good. We love those guys. They do really cool stuff. Let's talk about another community of creatives. Not that that's a word we endorse, but you know.
Well, it's because it has advertising tinge.
Oh,
Yeah, no. I mean,
anyone in marketing, they're creative.
I mean it in the positive sense, as in the people who make things, and it's another
Makers.
way to makers. I guess that would be the other way. But I kind of feel like Etsy encompasses more than just makers, because it's a lot of it's a little more kind of entrepreneurial than maybe makers necessarily than that implies.
Well, it is the idea that. So what we're talking about is Etsy. ETSY.com. And I wanted to talk about this because I buy many of my Christmas presents from Etsy for the last several years. Julia, my wife, introduced me to them, and I've never gone back. I love the community. It is kind of, to me, one of those communities that demonstrates that small-scale manufacturing can work as a business model, because you've got these people who do have viable production lines of small run things.
It's kind of like eBay, but instead of selling your old crap, it's stuff that you've made, or maybe the one thing that you can do better than anybody else in the world. You go out and you figure out a way to make a living at it, or at least supplement your income, or fund your hobby, or whatever level of.
It is like, it's actually very much like eBay in the buy it now category, right? So you also have people who sell just mid-century modern furniture, clocks, antique stuff. Oh, this is Maggie. Come here, Mags. No,
she's a little
come here,
afraid.
sweetie.
Camera shy.
She's a little, come here, sweet. Yeah, good girl. Anyway, so you do have a whole bunch of people on Etsy who just sell goods.
Like super specialty shops.
Specialty shops. Yeah, antique shops, and with certain tinge and everything.
So like Amazon is the biggest store in the world, online store. Etsy is the biggest bazaar. It's the biggest market, like an old school market.
Yeah, absolutely. It is like a flea market,
Yeah.
but then it's like a flea market and a craft fair all at one, because what's really exciting about Etsy is that people make stuff and they sell it, and they make things that you would have a hard time believing if your brother told you he was going to go into business making paper mache deer masks. You'd be like, I don't know about that,
Felt
buddy.
beards.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have several felt beards.
Knitted beards.
Yes.
Is where I like to the knitted beards. I felt
What you're
beards.
holding right now.
Well, so yes, I'm actually holding a cane that I bought on Etsy, and it has a lineage. It's a beautiful octopus cane topper.
Yes.
And
A lid.
I bought a cane from a maker on Etsy, and it had a resin top, and I loved the look of it, but it needed a heft.
Yeah.
I did something that is really, contacting the sellers and communicating with them on eBay is quite laborious. I find that the filter that eBay puts, even finding a seller to contact, can sometimes be quite difficult.
Right. The most interaction they want is A++ would buy again.
And I think it's that eBay thinks, well, if you're talking to the seller, then we're not making money on a sale, right? I understand that. But on Etsy, I wrote to the guy who made this and said, I love this, but I want one in metal. What could we do? I'd be happy to take one to a foundry if you'd sell me an original, and I promise you I'd only make one. And he wrote back and said, actually, I'm making some in stainless steel. I'll run one for you. It'll cost X much. And I asked for it blank because I wanted to put my own cane to it. I actually bought this beautiful piece of zebra wood, which I turned down.
Wow.
And put the octopus on. I did that this Sunday.
Wow.
And now it's got this beautiful heft, and I have this object. But more than that, I was able to communicate in this lovely, gracious way with the sculptor and maker of this. And that means it has... We have a relationship.
Story. Yeah. Now there is a story that goes with that is more than I went to the store and bought this.
So it's kind of the place between the RPF junkyard and Amazon or eBay.
Absolutely. And not only that, but I'm if I may, the stuff that people make and sell is incredibly well priced, because there's no middleman. There's no middleman on Etsy.
Etsy's the middleman, just to be clear.
Right. And they make a little percentage, but you still... Yeah, I have these 2 paper mache animal masks that I bought on Etsy just a couple of weeks ago from a maker, and they were incredibly reasonably priced. I think under $30 a piece. And to be able to buy something that was handmade, that's really specific, and honestly, you find I bought a beautiful painting of Hellboy recently that I loved. I'm going to hang up on the wall in my house, made by someone in England, and I bought it for... Again, a couple of $dozen.
So here's a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So do you go to Etsy looking for something in particular, or do you browse?
I do both.
Yeah.
All of my... It's late at night, I'm in a hotel room somewhere, and I need something to
Or
do
just at home.
shopping. Involves a kind of semi-directed looking. So there's always these things that I look for, like, oh, wonder what someone's doing with Hellboy. And one of the things that Etsy is totally lousy with, lousy in the sense of
Get
there's a
filled
numerous
with,
amount
yes.
of them, is knitted Hellboy caps with the horn stubs knitted into the cap. I love those things. I also sometimes I look for mid-century modern. Sometimes I look for old British naval stuff. Sometimes whatever I might be interested at the time. I have a couple of Curta hand calculators. So sometimes I look for that
The
kind
cranky
of stuff.
kind?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
There you go.
Now, also the experience with Etsy, you have to be careful too, because there's stuff that people sell in there that's not exactly what you want, or if you have to look at both eBay, Etsy, Amazon, all the marketplaces, do a little shopping.
Well, I guess when I'm looking at Etsy, I'm looking for something that really feels handmade and is probably handmade. So, whereas buying stuff, prop collecting is often a long-term exercise in disappointment because you buy something and it comes and you're like, wow, the pictures look so much better. But pretty much I've always been really ecstatic with what I've gotten on Etsy and also the service that I've gotten from the buyers. I bought a bunch of stuff last week for Christmas. I'm leaving a week before Christmas and the shop is closing down. So I needed everything to arrive at the shop this week. And the, 7 or 8 buyers I purchased presents from were all incredibly easy to deal with about, I need this in San Francisco by the end of the week. Let me know what the extra shipping cost might be. All right, the shipping cost. And I bought one thing that's really heavy. It's a present for my wife. I bought a really big mortar and pestle, like a 19-inch diameter
fantastic.
mortar and pestle. And the Etsy maker turns out to have a friend who is traveling to San Francisco. They're going to hand deliver it.
Oh, that's
because
fantastic.
They just happen to be driving down here for a show.
Well, so I mean, this is the thing that I love about Etsy, because I've been buying Christmas presents there for since I found Etsy.
Yeah.
For the people who will appreciate something that is not something you go to Walmart or Amazon or wherever and pick up, I've been getting Etsy gifts, and you always get something that's unique. And I think as we get into a world where you can get anything you want from Amazon 72 hours or so after you press the buy it now button, getting something that's handmade and that's special is much more valuable. At least, I mean, I'm much more excited about not that I'm not excited about all the stuff that we talk about in the site all the time, but it's that feels much more. Yeah, it feels like a much more thoughtful gift.
Well, and we should do a podcast on my early sculpture and art at some point. We should talk about that because I very seriously was a sculptor in my early 20s when I moved when I moved from New York to San Francisco in the early 90s, and Etsy strikes me as exactly what I would have been doing that back then if it existed back then, which is making stuff, some of it big, some of it small, selling it on this marketplace. Yeah. What I was doing back then was I was showing my work in group shows. New York, it's very hard to get your work into a group show. San Francisco, back in 90, 91, it was really easy. I was in like 40 or 50 group shows in the first 3 years I was here. And what that gave me as an artist was a tremendous amount of feedback, response from people about what they thought about it. And that really matured me and matured my aesthetic. Etsy is exactly, I think, that kind of thing. I think you see a lot of really amateurish stained glass jewelry and stuff like that that's not very well made on Etsy. But you also have to realize that you're looking at nascent builders who are learning their craft. Yeah. But, if they sell one brooch for $8 and they realize that they haven't sold any others, they've understood something about the market that they're in. They've understood something about their aesthetic. And the more that they do it, and if it pays for itself, the more experience they get. It's I'm all for that.
And on the other end of it, when you're talking about the people who aren't the nascent builders, when you talk about people who've built a following and are really good at what they do, a lot of times they're on Etsy too. And it's giving the same kind of connection that eBay did. In 15 years ago, I guess 10, 12 years ago, eBay connected all the people who like to collect pre-Kenner Star Wars 12-inch dolls with each other in a way that there suddenly became an economy for that stuff.
Yes.
And I think Etsy is doing a lot of the same thing for people who are doing small scale building.
Yeah.
And that's super interesting if you like to make stuff.
And even though that's extremely convenient, it's also come full circle in that there are places like Etsy, but in person, little fairs that go around. Travel.
Well, here in San Francisco, I think 2 out of the last 3 years, my wife and I have gone to the Bazaar at Golden Gate Park, and purchased. I have a beautiful hand-felted hand grenade downstairs. It's one of my favorite bizarro objects.
Hold on, what's a hand-felted hand grenade?
Well, you know how people do felting with wool and they make
Okay.
objects out of it? So this person made a super accurate,
like a
beautiful-
pineapple kind of
a
World
pineapple
War II.
grenade.
Oh, that's
Will you
fantastic.
take
Is there a
picture?
mustache
We'll
on
post
it?
a picture on it.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll show you.
To
There's-
Twitters.
Yeah, there's also the Renegade Craft Fair, which goes to LA, Austin, San Francisco, and Chicago. That's in San Francisco this weekend. But you go in, they go take over like the Concourse Exhibition Hall.
Yeah.
And for a weekend, it is Etsy in person.
So I really feel like, you know, the success of the Maker Faire, building its attendance by tens of thousands of attendees every single year, and I've spoken at every Maker Faire, and how many Maker Fairs there are, 60 around the globe
Yeah.
every year now.
And they're now they're self-growing.
It's
Like you download a kit and talk to the people at Make, and then they give you the stuff you need to do a Maker Faire. That's all. That's it.
Totally.
It's easy.
And I feel like, you know, the whole DIY maker zeitgeist that Mythbusters rode, we rode that wave. We were right alongside of Make Magazine, riding that wave in the early 2000s.
The reason you guys do, I mean, I assume everybody knows this, but the reason you guys do Mythbusters is because they wanted people who could build their own stuff.
They did. In fact, that was the selling point that Discovery hadn't heard at that point. People had pitched them urban legend shows for years.
Yeah.
But the wrinkle here was that the guys testing it would also be making it, would also be directly connected to the work that they were doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, Etsy is to me like I'm still not sure what the web is really great for, right? There's still the jury's still out, and we're still in the baby age of it. We're
Okay.
maybe teenage.
We can
years.
talk about this on a
Right.
different podcast.
But among the things that give me a harbinger of what it really could do that no one ever saw coming are things like Twitter and things like Etsy.
and
those are
Kickstarter and
Yes. Yeah, these business models that nothing ever considered until this model showed up. And Etsy it thrills me to surf Etsy. And again, the site's really well laid out. All of the vendors take PayPal, and communicating with them is a cinch.
And it's not, I mean, you're not going to get Amazon Prime 2-day shipping free.
No.
But you will get, I find it to be usually faster than eBay. And
definitely
people are
find
willing
that.
to upgrade shipping if you're willing to, like, there's a conversation to be had there, which I find is kind of hit or miss on
And it's an
eBay a lot of
international
times.
community too.
It is
Lots
international.
Lots of European makers.
I have bought lots of stuff from Europe, and they're really good about telling you, no, can't get there before then, but they'll insure it and all of that stuff.
So they had a ton of local makers at XO when we were there. I think you probably didn't get to spend too much time in the downstairs area, but a lot of those people are on Etsy, and it's people like Drapeland Design and just people who make really cool stuff that's unique. I mean, there's a guy who makes these little notepads that have replaced moleskins for me, and they look like the ones that you used to get from realtors and surveyors and stuff in the 70s.
great.
My dad always had them around because he was an auctioneer.
Yeah.
And I mean, anything you want, you can find. If you can't find somebody who makes it already, you can probably find somebody who, like you said, will make it.
Well,
for
and
you.
that's actually, I will leave that for a different podcast to talk about that whole branch, because it's awesome. But I mean, I can't stress enough. Just like Etsy is one of my favorite things.
You
want to
share the best thing we each have bought recently from Etsy?
The mortar and pestle was a pretty great thing, but as far as a handmade object, I have to say this octopus cane is my favorite.
Show
thing.
it to the camera. Let's put it up real close. You can
What's
do
that? Oh, there we
yeah.
go. There you can see.
Yeah, there it goes.
Yes.
Very cool.
He has 8 legs. He's got suckers. He's just beautiful.
I bought an old man sweater.
You did?
I bought the maniest old man sweater I've ever owned. It's a shawl collar with leather wrap buttons, and it rolls up the sleeves.
I bet if you needed an ugly sweater for a Christmas party,
Does
Etsy
it
would be a
have
great
elbow
place.
pads?
It doesn't have. I didn't go that far. I think elbow pads would have probably improved this more than I was looking for. I wanted something that's Pacifica warm, because I don't know, people who don't live in this area,
That's true.
they don't know what it's like on the coast where you get the fog in the wintertime. It is.
It can be.
We sound terrible. I mean, I've lived on the East Coast. I know what snow is like and all that, but you're living in a single wall home with
Nobody
no
has-
insulation, no central air, no heat. It's just you in the cold. So I got it's a wool sweater. It's a fabulous. Thanks, Etsy.
And I bought a crocheted Hobbs from Calvin and Hobbs, because there are none, because Bill Watterson does not want to commercialize that. So
Good for
someone
him.
knits them.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Wow.
So Norm infringes copyright on Etsy. I get an old man sword and you have a badass cane.
I don't consider it infringing copyright. I consider it exercising what ought to be a right under copyright law.
And on that note, we'll be back next week with another episode of Still Untitled. As a reminder, we have a new podcast feed on iTunes, so we could use some reviews. Go to iTunes, search for Still Untitled, hit us with some reviews. You can be honest. We can take it.
We can take it.
And yeah, subscribe to the new feed. We'll see you guys next week with another episode of Still Untitled. Bye.
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 There's some beautiful deer and raccoon masks behind me out of paper mache made by a maker that I bought recently. And they were like, is that me? Nope.
It's not me.
Oh, it's my phone.
Oh.
Hold on.
Pause.
You're going to pause.
Yeah, we'll cut this out.
Hello?